Wow. Just wow. That is what I think of the new Godzilla Minus One film. I just got back from seeing it. Wow. Okay, I got to get this out of the way real quick. Godzilla Minus One just dropped the mic. Other studios that are producing these overinflated movies with these huge-ass budgets, you need to take notice. Godzilla Minus One is probably the best picture of the year right now. And I'm not just saying because we're seeing a year of mediocre movies. This movie would have been good even in a year of stellar films. And dare I say, it should garner some award nominations. I'm not necessarily saying Oscar. I don't know. I mean, if it did, I wouldn't be amazed. This film merged several genres for a very satisfying experience. It was part period piece and human drama. It was part science fiction monster movie. And it was part horror movie in the same way that Jaws is a horror movie. You know, if you take all those elements, I'd have to say Godzilla is a genre-bending masterpiece, and they nail it. Very few times over the course of this movie did I feel like I was taken out of the reality that it was trying to create and the world that it was trying to create. I love the characters. Each one of them has a story that can be sympathized with. They handled certain things that probably would have been looked at as historically inaccurate. They gave reasons for that. Every plot hole, everything that you could think of that the average viewer might notice was addressed in this movie. Unless you are a major stickler, this movie was pretty ironclad and pretty airtight. And to give you an overview of the plot of the film, this is shortly after Japan has been completely massacred by the atomic bombs. They're just putting things back together. They're just getting their lives back in order. And the opening of the film starts with a pilot who was a kamikaze pilot. And the fact that he came home, excuse me, means that there's something dishonorable going on. How are you a kamikaze pilot that came home? Well, it turns out that he was afraid and he fled. And he pretended that his plane had some kind of malfunction, only we find out that there was no malfunction. He was simply afraid to lose his life. One of the most human, non-heroic opening characters I've ever seen. And this opens up a door for an extraordinary amount of development, and for him to go on that hero's quest and get that redemption that you knew was in store for him. You knew from the start this guy had to develop into the hero once it was established that he was the main character. And he meets other people that have lost folks, and they sort of form this patchwork family. The woman that ends up being his girlfriend was just a woman that was in the wreckage and the ruins. She had been given a baby. So you have this man who wasn't romantically into this woman who had a baby that wasn't even hers. And somehow they make it work. And you start to grow with them because this happens over a course of several years. They grow and they bond over a couple of years. And you watch this little child grow and become essentially their child. Well, early on in the movie, it's revealed that Godzilla the main character had encountered Godzilla on an island. It was the same island that he fled to. Sorry about that, folks. the same island that he fled to when he lost his nerve to complete a kamikaze mission. And on that island, the mechanics, because it was an aircraft repair island. That's what the unit there was to do. It wasn't a military one; it was a repair station. They were attacked by what was essentially Godzilla before he was fully irradiated. And there's some indications that he had already been irradiated before. And this thing starts tearing through the men. It's a smaller version of Godzilla, and it starts tearing through the men. And one of them says, look, you're a pilot. You've got skills. And you know how to man a machine gun. So we want you to get in the cockpit. And when you get a moment, we want you to fire up on the monster. Our hero is too afraid to do it. And because of his second act of cowardice, all of the men die. And I think with the exception of one, I might be wrong. But the way they treat the deaths of the repair crew, they're lined up the same way that bodies would be lined up if they had been killed by enemy combatants. And I found that fascinating. So they were drawing parallels between Godzilla and in the actual conflict. Godzilla was dangerous before he became fully irradiated. And when the final nuclear test happened, you see that it's affected him. So it can be inferred that this monster's angry because of being bombed, which it survived. But it also picked up, and it evolved and had these special abilities that made it even more dangerous and even more pissed off. So eventually, the hero goes on his quest, and there's a redemption arc that happens. And Godzilla, through the friendships that he forms with this unlikely group of merchant sailors that are basically being used as a sacrificial lamb to stall Godzilla, his family, his adopted family, which is what they were to him, his friends, his comrades, and for reasons that were pretty practical as to why the U.S. wasn't involved, and that was one of the things that was addressed. Without them, and the Japanese military was powerless to do anything for obvious reasons. This ragtag team of people you come to like, you come to love, you come to root for, and you watch their progressive growth. So we have a hero who goes from coward and grows into the role of understanding being a hero, but he also understands that there's no need for useless sacrifice. Symbolic sacrifice means nothing. It's about protecting the living. It's about being alive and being there for people that care and depend on you. So that story was so compelling. It was absolutely amazing. But the monster itself, Godzilla, I have never had more disdain for a version of Godzilla, even Shin Godzilla, who was horrifying to look at, but essentially he was a big, dumb, lumbering tower. Any damage he caused, it was because he was just too large. And he didn't really become a malevolent force. You know, he wasn't a malevolent force. He just simply was too large to be where he was at. And the deaths that happened up until that final moment when he unleashed his atomic power, every death was it was incidental. It was collateral damage. This thing wasn't even interested in human beings. This Godzilla is interested in the destruction of humans, and this monster is, make no mistakes, fucking evil. And this is the first time I've ever rooted against Godzilla. I didn't find anything sympathetic about the monster. I didn't find anything humane about the monster. I didn't find anything likable about the monster, but I loved it because it was so badass and so ferocious. You can't say that about past Godzillas. There's always been a certain degree of sympathy for the monster. And I understand why. I get why there's sympathy for Godzilla. And it's the same story. You know, you look up and this thing has been nuked and it survives, and it doesn't like that it's been nuked. So you have a monster that you could sympathize with, but it's so hateful. And it's more like Jaws than anything. This thing attacks anything in the water. If my memory serves me correct, it was responsible in its first attack for the deaths of 30,000 people. It was a rehash of Hiroshima to a smaller extent. But it openly went after people. It openly went after it, and it didn't discriminate against old people, young people, kids, children, infants. It simply didn't care. It had to go one way or the other. And the surprise ending sets up, and I don't think it'll happen. I don't think they'll go that route. I hope they don't cheapen Godzilla by making a sequel to it. Even though I believe that a sequel is in order somehow, some way. I hope they don't cheapen this movie. But if I had to give it a final score, I'd give it an 8. 8 out of 10. And it very well could have been a 10 if they had have let certain tragedies remain tragedies instead of tying up these loose ends that actually were a source of inspiration for the main character to become a hero. But I give it a solid 8. Some of the things that I'm taking off points for are negligible, but they were there. One of the things that I thought could have been handled better is the length of the movie. But there's no place that you really could cut from it, but the length of it kind of dragged in certain places. Even though the world building was continuing, it just kind of dragged, and it could have ended. 15 minutes makes all the difference in the world. If they could have found a better usage of time at some point, because it had already been established that we liked the characters, and I think they spent too long trying to make you like the characters. It's like, all right, we get it already. We fucking like the characters. You don't have to continue to do this. And a lot of the scenes were already shown in the trailers. This monster was not on screen very often, but when he was on screen, it was for a very long duration, which was satisfying. So while most of the scenes in the trailers showed what happened in the movie, seeing them in their totality was absolutely bananas. It was breathtaking. So I have to say right now, Godzilla, with its tiny budget, they've already made that money back, I'm sure. I'm sure they're going to make it over many, many times. The theater I was in wasn't full, but I go to the early movies, the matinees and the AM features, so I don't have to deal with the crowd. I fucking hate people a lot sometimes. But beyond that, I'm telling you, this was a crowd pleaser. Visually, it was incredible. The soundtrack was incredible. I actually think the soundtrack was so good that they probably could have left out the original score. I know they were paying it was a homage to the original conductor of the original Godzilla soundtrack, but I really think they could have left that off, because the original soundtrack was very haunting, and it went very well with the appearance of Godzilla, even more so, dare I say, than the original Godzilla soundtrack. The original Godzilla soundtrack, I really wish they had just left that out of this movie. That's how good this movie was on its own. So again, final score, 8 out of 10. Could have been a 9 or 10 out of 10, with the exception of those little nitpicks. But it is a must-see. It's good for guys. It's good for women. It's got all the elements that anybody could appreciate. And its uniqueness as far as mixing genres was absolutely second to none. Highly recommended. 2 thumbs up. Screensay endorsed. I hate that I couldn't drag Nick, the manifester, with the pen to it. But once he hears this review, I hope he'll be curious about it. I could do this again. I could go see it a couple of times. Anyway, this is your guy, the brave artist, with Screensay. And it's been a great day of monsters, kaiju, and incredibly enough, period piece film. Everybody take care. Until the next review, I'll talk to you later.